Welcome to Creekside Chats with Successful Real Estate Investors, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, promoting prosperity and harmony to help you flourish in all areas of life. Join in as we explore the motivations and goals of real estate investors and how their ability to invest abundantly has provided them with the time and freedom to contribute to the world in a creative and thoughtful way. Now please welcome your host, Dr. Allen.
Allen here with Todd Palmer, a man who knows that growth happens only when we lean into the uncomfortable. From his own experience, he knows the uncomfortable as he rose from a $600,000 debt burden to making the Inc. 5000 a record total of 6 times. Enlightened investors, let's look into Todd's life and discover the formula for dynamic success. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm glad to be here.
Let's take a trip back in time, and if you can bring to mind a time from perhaps your childhood that you can look back on now and go, that really was a formative experience that helped me to be who I am today. And childhood could be anywhere from 1 to 60. So,
well, good. Sometimes I still feel like I'm in childhood. It just depends on the day and depends on the topic. I think it's an interesting question. I'm glad you asked it. It's so powerful as I'm working with entrepreneurs. I ask them very similar questions so I can get to know them better, because I find a lot of the decisions they make as CEOs and as entrepreneurs and as leaders in regards to their business come from trying to address childhood concerns, trying to fill holes within, gaps. And I was no different. So I remember when I was 5 years old, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My brother was a senior in high school. My sister was just out of high school. And my dad was a controller, a finance person for one of the big 3 automotives here in Michigan. In the summer of 1974, when I was 5 years old, my dad passes away when I'm 5. And my mom has to return to work because now she has become the single parent, single earner in a household. My brother got an athletic scholarship, left Michigan to go into Kentucky. And my sister was already in the process of getting married anyways. We knew that. And she ended up following her new husband to Arizona to further his education. So within about a 90-day period, all the primary caregivers in my life were gone. Wow. My mom was at work, and this is during the OPEC oil crisis, and the closest job she could find to us that paid a livable wage for her was 2 hours away one way by car. So she would start her day at 5 a.m. and she would get home at 7 p.m. And as a child, what the message I kept sending myself is I can't rely on anybody. I can't. Everybody's left me. I'm unlovable. They've all abandoned me, which obviously is not the case. But as a 5-year-old, that's how I processed it. So flash forward to becoming an entrepreneur, I had the rugged individualist attitude that I can start this company and I can do all the departments and I can do this. And for a while, that worked. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I can solely rely upon myself. It's like climbing Mount Everest without oxygen. Oxygen's for other kids. I'll be fine. Until I got to the death zone with my business and it didn't, the rugged individualist attitude, the attitude that I took from childhood no longer served me well.
Talk to us about those 5-year-old times. Not only did you feel abandoned, you must have felt isolated.
Oh gosh, absolutely.
How'd you deal with it as a 5-year-old?
I haven't thought about it. I guess when I really think about some of the traits that I carried forward is I, again, became very self-reliant. So I would create my own entertainment. I would create my own worlds, my own fantasy worlds. As I got a little bit older, I got very much into sports and to be part of teams and athletics. But it was weird because even in those times, I always felt like the outsider as part of a group or a part of a team. So I think how I talked to myself, I really gravitated towards the sport of baseball. And baseball is the only team sport I know that it's predicated, first of all, on failure, because you're successful as a hitter if you fail 7 out of 10 times to hit 300. Combined with it's a team sport, a lot of the competition is one-on-one between the batter and the hitter. And so for me, I never played football or any of those like really team unifying activities. So I think when I look back on it, and I really got lost in like things like television, just fantasy places to escape to as a child where I could be, in theory, be around another community of people since my community, my tribe had changed.
Some good coping skills and probably not necessarily bad for the entrepreneur. You had mentioned that it was the rugged individualist that ultimately stood in your way. Give us some examples as to how that actually did play out.
In the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, it served me really well. I would get very disciplined, and I wasn't typically a very disciplined kid. And so I got very schedule regimented because I was having to do it all by myself. I also had become a single parent. So I was raising my son by myself as well. So I was doing a lot of things by myself. I was growing my business, raising my family, and that kind of filled a lot of the gaps from childhood because I was seen in the drama triangle. I was either the rescuer or the hero. I was providing for my child. I was helping my clients. I was helping people get jobs. I opened a recruiting company. So I, broke my day into getting up, getting my son to daycare, getting to the office. Half my day was sales. The other half was ops, picking my son up from daycare. From 5:30 to 7:30, 8 o'clock was family time. And then he would go to bed and then it would start over again. I would do the accounting. I would do the bookkeeping. I would do all the things that were non-money making activities in the evening. And I just did it over and over again on a pretty much a daily basis, Monday through Friday. And so being the rugged individualist taught me a lot. So it did serve me well at times. So I learned a lot of different categories. I taught myself QuickBooks. I learned all the HR regulatory issues. I learned to both talk to the clients and try to serve their needs, also to serve with the candidates' needs as the job seekers. And so that allowed me, I think, that the opportunity to see the business from all perspectives in the early stages. So when I started hiring people, and if someone didn't work out or someone left for another job, I always knew in the back of my mind, I could always step into their role. I could always fill that gap until a replacement was found. So at times I really did convince myself that was the better way to go. The flip side of that is I didn't realize I had knowledge gaps. I had gaps in my knowledge, gaps in my understanding of certain pieces of the business, certain pieces of the finances specifically. And the gaps then became bigger and bigger as the business got more successful because I couldn't manage all those things. And I was kidding myself thinking I could do it that way forever.
I can see that in myself a lot of times. And I think I can do it all. Yet I know there's many things about the business that need specialized expertise. Plus the fact there's that time factor. When did you come to the realization that this rugged individualist is getting in the way of your ultimate success? How'd you come to the realization and how did you deal with it once you came to that realization?
I thought I had come to it in about, give or take, 8 years into the business. I'd hired a couple of executives to work on I created an executive team. And what I found out in retrospect was I thought I was delegating, but I was really advocating. I would just give it to them and they could handle it. They had all this experience. I didn't rarely give it a second thought. So that was the first thing. Second thing is I didn't create any metrics or any KPIs, any key performance indicators, whether they were succeeding or failing. If they were getting new clients, that's all I really worried about. I had an image of what a successful staffing company was if I got to $20 million in revenue. So that's all I focused on. That was it was very singular in the focus. And we didn't really have strong training programs. We were missing some key pieces of it. And I advocated all of it to them. You guys, I'm paying you a lot of money, get it fixed. What I didn't realize is I had a responsibility to manage their processes, to hold them accountable. And because I was, as a rugged individualist, and I just built this team, I think the story I told myself is I built a work family, and I didn't want to upset that. And I didn't want to get anybody angry at me. So my way of dealing with things was to not deal with it. My way of dealing with things was to put my head in the sand, hoping it would just pass over. That didn't work well. So by September of 2006, I was $600,000 in debt. I was 2 months away from running out of all of my money, including having to give my house to the bank. My kid and I were going to be homeless. And I had a massive bout of imposter syndrome. My self-esteem in my version of imposter syndrome was tied to the business. If the business was great, I was great. If the business was awful, I was awful. And when the business was the debt was just mounting, the itty bitty shitty committee in my head was meeting on a daily basis telling me how bad I was and how much I sucked. And I was letting everybody down, and I was letting my son down. I was letting myself down. I was letting my employees down. I was just a failure across the board. I woke up one day and it was almost as if I call it my entrepreneurial rock bottom. Like, I need help. I cannot do this anymore. It's literally taking a toll on my health, my family, my business, everything. So I hired a coach. And for the first time, I really opened up and told somebody how bad it was and how the finances were off and how I wasn't managing the staff and how I had a lot of toxic culture to exist and I didn't address things. And the coach I think at that point, he had over 25 to 30 years of experience in the staffing space. And he came in and he was really a great accountability person for me. And he helped me recognize that I had good ideas. I was avoiding conflict. I was avoiding tough conversations. I was not dealing with my staff. I had allowed people to stay in my company who didn't match my core values. So by September of '06, we'd been working together for about a month, and he said, "You've got to make changes." So I literally walked in one day and fired my entire company and started the business over. And so in that process of transformation and change, he helped me figure out I had to do 5 positive things every day because essentially I probably had a version of some type of depression, and I needed to get out of that doom loop. And then we changed up to a process of how we changed our hiring. We started hiring specifically to the core values of the organization. And at the time, the core values of the organization were very much my personal core values. And we hired people for their DNA, not for their resume, because we figured if I've got good people, I can teach them to be good recruiters. I used to just hire, hey, if you're a great recruiter, I would put up with your nonsense because you're supposedly a great recruiter. And that was part of the process of turning the business around, was getting me unstuck, getting me more accountable, getting me more invested in the business, getting me to make tough changes, getting me to make tough conversations so that the business could then hopefully live to fight another day. I don't want to create PTSD for you guys. It's triggering a lot for me.
Yes, I don't know. I talk to so many people who they may not call it rock bottom, but there is always this dark period in their life that they look back on and go, wow, that was the worst day of my life, but it was really the best day in my life. And it makes all the difference.
It's crazy because I never wanted to talk about it. I was like, I didn't tell anybody. And I'm working on my second book, and I'm dealing with my publisher the other day. And I said, basically all the stuff I didn't talk about for years has now become something I talk about every day. And in the process of sharing that story, hopefully others will heal through that piece, or they'll have awarenesses around it. So my new thing has become the mess has become my message. And so I appreciate being on your program today to be able to tell people this, because I think a lot of folks, a lot of younger entrepreneurs or startup entrepreneurs, even people who've retired and they're now becoming entrepreneurs, think that success is just a straight line from 0 to 10, and there's no bumps along the way. And they see it in pop culture or Shark Tank or whatever. Oh yeah, it's an easy job. No, you're working 80 hours for yourself to avoid working 40 hours for somebody else. You got to do the work. And it's so interesting to me that, like you said, that a lot of people go through a dark period. A lot of people hit a bottom. And I find entrepreneurs, by and large, are some of the most resilient, most tenacious, most hardworking people ever. And so now what my coach did for me is now what I do for my clients is I get them working on the right things in the right way, in the right direction to make changes that can create potentially even generational wealth.
Since you're a thought leader, I want you to think about this question. It's a question I keep asking myself and hoping that there is a good answer. Can we help people get their lives together without having them go through the deep, dark places of rock bottom?
I ask myself that all the time too. So I have people who say they want to work with me, and they'll approach me, we'll go through a diagnostic, and it'll be very abundantly clear to me that they're not ready. And they're not ready because they can intellectually see change is required. They can intellectually see that they're stuck, but their emotional rooting and their internal devices are preventing them from doing the hard work. So we go back to the core point. It's only a core value if you're willing to hire and fire by it. I had a client or a prospect that he came to me, and the biggest bottleneck in his business was the CEO, who also happened to be his brother. And I said, so what are you prepared to do to make the change? Because it's very clear that the title and the responsibilities exceed the skill set. Take the names off of the list. And he goes, I can't fire my brother. And the business went under. It went under. And it's people like that who aren't able to make it. Typically, people come to coaches because they've reached a ceiling of complexity. And that ceiling of complexity is the business is either in decline and they don't know how to stop the free fall, or the business is stagnant and they don't know how to get it moving upwards again. Typically, rarely do people actually be proactive and say, my business is growing at about a 5% year-over-year rate. I think it could grow with help at a 15% rate, which is a great rate. I'm going to hire a coach. That the level of self-awareness typically is rarely there. It's the guy who's like, I'm losing my family. Like me. And so when I speak, I always tell my story because people say, I had a client of mine say, I want to work with you. I'm only $100,000 in debt. You're 6 times worse. You can help me. And I find that too, this is really interesting. I love the question because it's just I'm adding layers and as I'm thinking through it. The reality I found is people often say to me, I'm going to hire a coach once I feel motivated to, or I'm going to take action once I feel motivated. And anybody who's really done any kind of psychological work or worked with mindset coaches or therapists or counselors, they can really tell you that action first, motivation second. You've got to take an action and then the motivation will come off of the result of the first action. And I say that to people And then they start quoting movies at me. And no, that's Hollywood. The guy, Jerry Maguire, woke up and he wrote a manifesto and he was so motivated. I said, no, you're missing the point. He woke up, he took action, he wrote the manifesto. You're inversing the problem. And people like, I'll work with a coach when I'm ready. Like during these COVID times, it's been so fascinating. There are people who I could so help, and they're so afraid to invest the money because they see it as to spend the money. Using a coach is an investment. It's not a spend. A coach should be able, I believe, as a coach, I always tell my clients, you're going to get 4 to 6 times ROI off of the investment you put into me. Now we have to figure out what the ROI means to you. I've got one client, his revenue grew 70%, his profits grew 500%, but his biggest ROI is he only works 3.5 days a week now. So he's got his time back. So wonderful. Everybody measures it differently, but he was so ready. He's like, there's buying signals. Like, I'm so ready for these reasons. Those are the ideal clients. It's the guy who says, well, all my friends have coaches, all my CEO buddies have coaches. I'm going to hire a coach too, because that's the flavor of the month. Those guys aren't ready.
I would like to find the secret of pushing that button for everybody who needs it but can't find it. If you ever find it, let me know.
I think so much. What I love your intention behind it. Like, you want to be of service. You want to help people. And I find for me, just the more curious I am, and the more questions I ask them, they often will arrive at either they're ready or they're not. It's not like buying a car. It's not like buying an appliance where the salesperson is going to convince them. You've got to be ready, because at the end of the day, this is how I view it. My job. So I did my hero's journey. I did my job as a CEO for 25 years. I don't do that anymore. My job is to work with my clients as the guide of their hero's journey. They have to do the work. My job is to make sure if they've run into bottlenecks, or they run into corners, or they get stuck, I help them get unstuck. Or they're running into strategy issues, I help give them more strategies. They've got to do the work. The worst client for me is, hey, can you come in and fix my team? Who does your team report to? They report to me. Okay. Who picked the team? I did. Who holds them accountable? I probably should. Okay, so all these things, your team needs to be fixed. But what is the one commonality? And if they can't grasp what the one common factor in their business is, the entrepreneur, is the CEO, then Mark Cuban couldn't fix them. There's certainly something I can't do.
What I find ironic here is that you were in the personnel business, and personnel was the one thing you were actually avoiding.
That is. I thought the same thing. Yes, I totally see the correlation. It's the shoemaker's kids. I'm really good at making shoes for other people, but my kids have no shoes.
We all have to take those journeys. I think it's a lifelong journey. Share with our viewers and listeners how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to reach out to me is through my website, todd@extraordinaryadvisors.com. And anybody who's heard me on the show today, by all means, reach out. I'm happy to give you 30 minutes of my time for free. I'm not going to put you into a lead generation program or anything else like that. I just know that, going back to one of your earlier questions, in my darkest times, I was in a dark time for 6 or 8 months before I reached out and asked for help. So I see it as a real blessing for me to be in a spot where I could be of service to others. And I know I did this round robin program when COVID first hit. I did 42 coaching calls in 30 days with people I'd never talked to before. So I put a message out through my network, and I talked to people in India, in South Africa, all around North America, even into Mexico, helping them get unstuck around, getting them freed up to see opportunity within tragedy. So anybody who's listening, I'm happy to give my time to you, to even in 30 minutes, to maybe we'll have 1 or 2 nuggets and aha light bulb moments that you can take away from the conversation.
I have one last question. When you come to the end of this life's journey, how do you want your epitaph, your obituary, whatever you want to call it, to read?
That is a really great question. Strangely enough, I've spent a lot of my time working on it, because my father did pass away when he was 45. So I always had in my mind, if I live to be 45, that's the family history. That's as far as. So I always had like this really weird younger person's thought processes around legacy. And I really want my legacy just to be 2 words: improve lives. About a dozen years ago, I had the privilege and honor of meeting Simon Sinek before he even put his first book out. And I worked with him to help me figure out what my why is. And I want to improve lives, whether it's appearing on a program like yours today, or even I was talking to somebody at the grocery store the other day in line, and they were telling me about their job search struggles. And I said, well, have you tried this? Have you tried that? They said, what do you know about jobs? I said, well, I wrote a book about it. The guy goes, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And he starts taking all these notes. It was just from a conversation. But I really want my legacy to be improving lives, because I think there's such a need out there to be of servant leadership to others.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on Creekside Chats with Successful Real Estate Investors, brought to you by Steed Talker Capital. For more information, as well as access to our free ebook on enhancing your well-being through real estate investing, be sure to connect with us at steedtalker.com. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steed Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine and enhance the humane treatment of horses worldwide. Steed Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures, great and small, flourish abundantly. Connect with us at steedtalker.com.